inspection after September. So we're trying to, we were given one truck by you guys, and we put together some trades and some other funding, so we're gonna come up with two, and we're gonna continue to work forward. We're gonna have to replace some of those vehicles. They're 20 years old, and they're rotten. The salt, it really isn't good for those trucks.
Is that on the radar with the mayor?
He's
For us
aware
to
of
take
it.
care of that right away?
He is aware of it.
Good.
We've worked out two, and we're trying to come up with a way to grab maybe a couple more.
Awesome.
They're not cheap,
Right.
you know.
Anything else you want to add, Ray, at this juncture? Or?
Well, the grants that we have going, I don't know if you guys are aware, but we received $450,000 in a Complete Streets program that is eligible to us if we meet the criteria for 3 years. So we're in the middle of phase one of that, which is the work you see around the Veterans Center. We're going to try, and what this thing is, it's to do handicap accessibility for people. So you're going to see a lot of changes downtown where we put those handicap accessible ramps in with the yellow nubs there for the wheelchairs. So that is in progress also. We're doing a bunch of sidewalk on Arlington. And the list of sidewalks that we're doing, I guess I could just let you know. Main Street, Pond Street, Iliad's going to be completely done this year. Green Street, Grand Street, in the back on Mill Street, I think we're going to try to do 600 more. The program that we have going now is to try to get walkers in the school zones. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, the transportation for school is very expensive, as you know. So we're going to try to talk people into trying to walk to school. That's what we're trying to do. I'll let Roger throw in his.
Good evening. On the water and wastewater side, I want to just reiterate what Ray said in terms of all the help we've gotten from Wendy Weeks in terms of working with us on grants so that we're able to impact infrastructure. It makes a huge difference, not only to what we get accomplished, but it saves the ratepayers a significant amount of money. Some of the capital projects that we'd like to do, we don't have funding for, we're able to put together, and especially this downtown project has really been a huge benefit for us on an infrastructure basis. I know it's been inconvenient for a lot of the people downtown for the last probably 6 weeks, but between sidewalks, the sewer mains that we've been able to reline, manholes we've been able to refurbish, all paid for out of the grant proceeds. So it's a significant benefit all the way around. Earlier, when we did the free cash appropriations, I indicated we were going to be doing Highland Street. That's ongoing as we speak. We also have the pump stations at both Pond Street and over at Wachusett Reservoir. Pond Street is a critical component to the water system because it interacts with all 3 pressure zones. Wachusett Reservoir obviously is an emergency source. A couple of years ago, we had pretty significant drought, and we were looking at options, and I think one of the things that came out of that, we need to upgrade the Wachusett Reservoir pump station. So that's ongoing as we speak. Both of those should be done, we're hoping, by the end of this year. We may go to an odd even watering here shortly, something we've looked at, but we'd rather be safe than run into a particular difficult situation. And the other streets were Fairmont Street and Beacon Street are scheduled for later on, probably either late summer or in the fall. And then we're going to jump over to sewer. Crawford Street has an upgrade that's going to be part of a system-wide hydraulic capacity increase. So we're going to go from Crawford Street during the summer while school's out, and then we'll go over to Fairmont and Beacon Street and do the water main. So trying to minimize the impact on traffic if we can. So those are the main projects. Just what you're seeing with the relining, we're going to do over 30,000 feet of sewer main relining over the next, between what's gone on now and next spring. It's part of the effort. We do an I&I evaluation. We're working with DEP, Wright Pierce engineering firm, do an evaluation through the end of this year, put a report together and send that to the state. So it's going to give them an indication of where our weak points are in the collection system and any upgrades that we need to be planning for. So those are what we're looking forward to right now. The budgets, both of my budgets, one was up, the water budget was up slightly. Sewer budget was down slightly. It reflects the receipts, the trend that we see. We were down approximately 60,000 units of consumption over the past year, so that impacts your revenue stream. So based upon the fact that every year we come back down as part of the free cash process, you appropriate that money back to us that came in excess of what the budget is. We've got enough capital money now to work through the end of this year, and then in the spring when free cash comes back to be recertified and then reappropriated, I expect to see some additional funds available to begin construction next spring. So that's kind of like the overview for what we've got planned and what I anticipate for revenues going forward. And happy to answer any questions.
Roger, what the result of that I&I work ultimately is that result in savings with respect to sewage treatment? Or?
Well, it identifies the areas where we're getting the most inflow and infiltration. You know, some areas will have more inflow. There might be a catch basin that's connected, cross-connected to the sewer. The work that we're doing over here at the Housing Authority right now, the Housing Authority, back when it was constructed, connected to the sewer system with the drainage. So all the drainage from that site was going into the sewer system. So it's taken a little bit longer because there are some difficulties. It's built on a slab. There's no basement to work with, but we expect to be done actually tomorrow on that. But there's a huge amount of groundwater and stormwater that gets in the system. Those sections of the system that are identified as being deficient are the ones that we're going to focus on going forward. We already knew some areas, so when we did the relining with this present contract, we've relined the entire neighborhood, North Street up to the Lunenburg line. We've done all of downtown. So your area downtown is, as we speak, from Lancaster and Central, all of Pleasant Street, and all of Main Street, Water Street, Mechanic Street going to the plant has been upgraded. So over the last 3 to 4 years, between grants and SRF funding and just regular revenue, we've been able to completely upgrade those sections of the city. So we're in really good shape that way, but we got to keep sticking with it.
So, but with less groundwater being treated, does that result in?
It's a
lesser
double-edged
cost?
sword. Sometimes, okay, so water stays out of the pipes, but sometimes water that's in the pipes gets out of the pipes too. So we're seeing a kind of over the years, with all the work that we've done, it's been relatively flat. We added a couple 100,000 gallons because of the treatment plant at No Town. And we see a little bit actually of an increase rather than a decrease in the groundwater getting it to the filter plant. So it's a work in progress. It really is.
I'll turn to the Finance Committee. Are there any questions from the Finance Committee?
Quickly, Ray, you said you had 4 standing trucks that are not going to pass inspection, but you've managed to put together or trade so that you have 2?
We have 2, and we're replacing the dump bodies on 2 that are completely rotted to be able to have those as spares.
Okay. And you did say that you did put this on the radar with the mayor's office?
Yes.
Okay.
2 other things I'd like to add before we go to questions is we are also, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but at Jungle Road, we've taken down that old transfer station building. We're going to grind up all the material there. We're going to fill that place, and we have interest in it. So, I mean, the way it looks now isn't the prettiest, but by the time we're done, it's going to look nice. So that's a project we have going. And another thing is, and I think a lot of people have noticed because we received a lot of compliments, is the cemetery. The guys down there are doing a tremendous job. The place is turned completely 180 degrees in the right direction. But their budget is minimum. So we're gonna come before you guys shortly, within a month, and present a couple of things to you that we're thinking. So just be ready for that.
I got an idea what those are, too.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Finance?
Yeah, couple things. We talked about Chapter 90 money. I think that the governor is going to do this year the same thing that he did in 2015. Is going to infuse additional Chapter 90 money. Do we know what Leominster's portion is going to be? I think it's $200 million statewide.
Yeah, I'm not certain what it
Do
is
we know what
yet.
our portion is?
Right now, we have 1.1.
And that doesn't include the extra money the governor.
Correct.
Okay, good. So it'll be more. Okay.
I don't know, have you guys seen that yet, this list?
No.
'Cause it's getting ready.
I'd
We're
like
gonna
to.
submit it for, you guys to look at.
Yeah, that'd be great. That was going to be my next question. Another question I have is street lighting expense. I think all of our lights are swapped over now, right?
Right.
To the low
LEDs.
LED, yeah.
LEDs, right? So I thought that was going to result in a savings
It is, but,
in our expenses to operate them, and I don't see that reflected in the budget.
and it's not reflected in the budget, but if you look at the message that was included in the budget submittal, what we're doing is we're actually going to pay down the debt for the transition. So there's some liability that instead of bonding it long-term, we're going to pay it down out of those savings on an annual basis. So that's what it's fully funded, it's flat, level funded from last year. But what we're going to do is we're going to pay down the liability. We have approximately $450,000 to $500,000 in reimbursements between National Grid and the program that we worked with MAPC on. State provided a 30% reimbursement when you transitioned your high-pressure sodiums over to LEDs. So we're closing that out, but we haven't received those rebates. So we're doing a short-term borrowing right now. We're going to pay that down, and then what you see in the budget under the street lighting budget, what we don't expend is going to be applied to that outstanding debt. So you're going to have less than a 2 full year pay down on this. It's really going to be cost effective for you.
Right.
But the other advantage is maintenance-wise, these have a less than 1% failure rate any given year. So in Leominster, that amounts to approximately 30 to 35 lights, and it's going to be a huge savings long-term for the city.
Good. Another question I have is about the cemetery, which it does look good. It's a lot of improvements, over the past few years. And certainly you requested money, but didn't get a whole lot. You requested $145,000 and only got $24,295. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to be presented, and I'm sure that there'll be some supplemental appropriations coming out of the
Perpetual.
Perpetual Care Fund, which I will vote against. And I'm just wondering, Ray, if, you've spoken to the mayor about a cemetery commission, which I believe we're required to have, and we don't.
The thought has been brought up.
Okay. I think that, even though things are going in the right direction there, it's always good to have, that advocacy and to, find people that are willing to serve, to, come up with different ideas. I know that I've spoken to a few people about putting, what do they call columbariums or.
That's part of what we're
somewhere.
proposing.
Okay. So that kind of stuff too. I think
Yeah.
if we had a cemetery commission, maybe you'd have some good volunteers that do some of the legwork too, and and whatnot, and have some good information to present too. So
We could use help enforcing rules and regs that people just don't want to abide by. Sometimes that place has a lot of things left around that
yeah, I agree.
impedes our ability to clean the place up. So that is something we will also look at addressing.
Okay. I guess the pipe replacement, Roger, do you think maybe we could potentially be a little bit more aggressive with some of the replacement? I mean, I know that that would result in some kind of an additional raise of the water rates, but, I think at the pace we're going, it's gonna be hard to keep pace with what needs to be replaced. I mean, could we have some kind of a reasonable increase, or something presented to us that we could show some kind of a reasonable increase, but, really get those infrastructure repairs sped up a little faster? Or do we have the manpower to do that if we had the funds or the revenue available?
Well, we're doing Highland Ave as we speak, but we can only do, approximately half to three-quarters of a mile with our crew, and then you wind up contracting some of it out, which with prevailing wage rates, you wind up paying about $160 to $180 a foot for any pipe replacement. So that aspect of it is a pretty expensive proposition when you contract it out. I have talked to one of the people down in the water department. We're going to sit down, Ray, myself, Mark Pimerini, and the general foreman, and take a look at what's called cleaning and lining the pipes. It's a little bit different process than what you're seeing with the sewer pipes, where you go in and you clean them and you reline them. It's similar in that way, in that you go internally, but you go in and they actually use a process to clean the line, and then they re-cement the line. So if your base pipe is got structural integrity that can handle it, that's one way of doing it, and that's a lot more cost effective. Instead of paying, say, $180 a foot, you're going to pay like $80 to $90 a foot. So there's a savings there. You could accomplish more of that. So that's one thing we are going to look at. But there's no quick and easy way. I mean, if you're looking to do, let's say you wanted to pick up a mile of pipe, and let's say, just for discussion's sake, it's going to be like, I don't know, we got almost $1 million a mile. It's a pretty significant increase on the ratepayers. So we're looking at other options. We would like to get some more sections done, and we'd like to get some of the really large transmission mains more, because those are the ones that carry, if you have an issue, it carries it throughout a neighborhood. So, but we are going to be looking at that.
All right. I think I'm good. I'm good for now.
Good for now?
I'm good for now.
Members of the council generally? Councilor Marchand?
Just a quick question, anticipated increases in water and sewer rates, or are we pretty stable?
Well, we just did them.
Right.
We raised the rates back in the fall of 2016. We did a 2-year. We did it April 1st of 17, and we just raised them again April 1st of 18. So even though we lost revenue because of the reduction in consumption, both in terms of water and sewer, we've cut back on some expenses. So I'd like to see if we can have a normal year. I mean, and we cut the sewer budget a little bit. I think we're going to be okay. And I think what makes it worthwhile to do a conservative approach on the budget is when we get the revenue back when you do free cash. So that goes straight to capital projects. So I think, to look at another rate increase right now, I'd like to wait a couple of years. I'd like to wait 2 years. We've got some debt maturing. Long-term, what I think I'm going to recommend is you wait 2 years. We can match maturities on some of the sewer loans and one of the water loan for No Town. As those mature, we've got to do an upgrade on Fallbrook, which is 30 years old, and then we can go to some of the additional sewer work that we need to do. All the sewer pump stations and the treatment plant are in good shape. We've got one final aspect of the wastewater plant, which is be $6 million. I think what I'm proposing anyway is to get the maturity of the 5 loans that are out, take that maturity and just roll that debt service into the new one, and it'll have minimal to no impact on the ratepayer. If you want to, ideally we raise the rates 3 to 4% every other year, just to try and keep pace with the consumer price index, cost of living, so you don't fall behind. But I wouldn't recommend a rate increase right now.
Thank you.
Counselor Arndinger, I think. in your hand.
Just a quick question, Mr. Brooks. All these aggressive projects you're talking about, capital projects, they've already been funded, is that clear, through grants and through free cash?
The ones that you see in downtown now, yeah.
That's
yeah.
already been funded.
Correct.
So you will, next year, when you get the free cash, you will reallocate some of that money to the following year's projects, correct?
Well, it'll actually be, when we get the free cash, it falls into that late in the fiscal year, but
Okay,
all the capital money goes to capital projects. So when we're
Okay.
doing the construction through that calendar year, we use that money.
that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Counselor Shalfo Zephyr.
Thank you. This is for Roger. So the money that comes back at the end, when we get a free cash certified, that goes back into water and sewer, you use all of that for capital projects?
Yeah.
It's all, okay. I have one question on the budget, and this is it's the water budget. So I'm looking at line item 1376. It's water capital outlays. The department budget request is $100,000. The mayor's department, or the mayor's budget is $200,000. So he increased that line by $100,000. I just want to know what that's for.
You're at
1376. It's in the summary. It's on the summary page. It's right before the detail.
Yeah, we had a discussion just prior to submitting this, so we changed it by 100,000 because we thought we could afford to do another 100,000 for capital, it's just capital upgrades. I think just looking at what we had last year, for some reason, hang on, let me just look at one thing real quick. Yeah, we had changed that right at the very end of the budget process. That was actually something that I had sent down to them, and between the time they did the draft and the final version, I had increased it 100,000. And I'll tell you how I did that.
Yeah. In the detail, it's line 1374.
Yeah, well, we took some off of, I lowered OPEB and
Part-time
My
labor,
pension-
part-time labor was lowered by about 10,000.
yeah, that was part of it. But the other was, the health insurance came in, I think when the city went out to get that, it was a competitive situation. So I was able to reduce what we had actually anticipated, because I'm going to have residual in that account this year, the support services. So we were able to take the support service money, put it into capital.
Okay, but the difference between the budget is still $90,000. What I'm looking at is 5.7 versus 5.8,
Right.
what the department requested and what the mayor submitted.
No, I got the point. So,
Oh.
in other words, when we originally submitted that, it was still a work in progress, but in looking at what we were going to have left over this year in support service allocation, like, just to give you an idea. So support service this year, I'll have about $80,000 left over in health insurance costs. And the OPEB liability, let's see, I could reduce that by approximately $15,000 to $20,000. So that's why we just took it and put it into capital. I didn't put it anywhere else. But it's just for projects. So, I mean,
Roger, I think it's just a typo.
what's that?
I think it's just a typo. Inside in the line item is just a typo. On the summary, it's correct.
Oh, all right. I mean, because I remember changing it myself
Yeah.
late in the day.
I don't know what the typo is. I'm just curious about the difference between,
It should say 200,000 for request, not 100,000.
so the department request on the summary page should say,
Does say 200,000 on
not on mine. No.
on mine. It does.
Do you have yours? Yeah, it's I'm just curious, it's a $100,000 difference.
Yeah.
From the department request to what the mayor submitted to us. I'm just curious as to why and
We-
what that means for ratepayers. I don't know,
Nothing, because it's just a reallocation of the expenses, because the expenses, as we anticipate them, aren't as high. So in looking at it, I felt we could take the money from the support services, which is just, it's an item that I can't use for any capital expense at all.
Yeah.
Took it out of that and put it into capital for materials.
So
but there's still a net increase in the mayor submitted budget of $90,000. So if it goes, I understand shifting within the overall budget, but I'm just curious as to why the submitted budget is $90,000 over what the department requested, at least in what I'm looking at.
Yeah, but to your other point,
Yep.
it's $100,000 more.
Correct, in that one
Right.
line item offset
Correct.
by a reduction elsewhere.
Right.
Yep,
So the reduction that you see is 10,000 from part-time labor.
Yep.
And then the rest of it I took out of support services because I have extra money left over.
Mm-hmm.
And I had actually changed that. I mean, I know John had looked at it before we went down, so it went to the mayor as a $200,000 item from us.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it doesn't show that, it says department request is 100,000, we changed that after.
Okay, so the information in the book is wrong.
Right,
Okay,
on that line item.
okay.
So you picked up 100,000.
We took 100,000 from
Part-time labor
support service and part-time and put it into capital.
Right. And the only issue is that your request should say 200, not 100.
Right.
Correct, that's right.
So it doesn't look
Yeah,
like a net
right.
increase, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the council? Council Feckley.
Thank you. Ray, last year, and I believe the year before when you came down, you said that your crew is, a lot of them were getting ready to retire. How is your crew doing? The salary hasn't gone up? Do you have the same number of
We're-
crew, or what's going on?
We have the same number. A couple of more guys retired. What we're trying to do is get younger. So we're trying to entice younger people to get involved in the water system. That's a tough one because that's very technical and our water system is very complicated. So I'd like to get some younger people in to start training how our system functions. We have a couple of really good guys left in our system, and that's our goal, is to make that crew more informed and better educated.
Okay.
But as we speak now, we're 38 guys.
All right, and then I just had one other question under the cemetery department. So you had requested $75,000 for replacement equipment, and I assume it's furniture, and 120 was approved. Is that similar to the equipment situation in the DPW side, that you're going to be coming to us with some
That,
requests?
the chapel roof is caving,
Okay.
that we want to architecturally repair. So that's a goal of ours.
Okay, so you're probably going to be bringing that before us at
Yes.
some point? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other council member have a question? Council Dombrowski?
I've been sitting here for a while, and I know we haven't looked at the connection fees in a while, either, in town or out of town, water and sewer. Do you think there's a need to look at that, or are they still pretty competitive?
We're competitive, and the housing boom's over. We don't have a lot of new houses. I mean, obviously that one subdivision's finishing up on, Willard Street,
Castle Land.
Castle Land. So, I mean, we're pretty competitive with what other communities ask for. We haven't really seen, I was here in the 80s and it was crazy, and we didn't
Yeah.
charge anything. We missed the boat, really. We charged $25 connection fees back then. So I think we're $2,500 for water, and we're $1,000 for sewer, plus 2 times the inflow of how many bedrooms they have. So we're pretty competitive.
Okay.
All set, Councilor?
Yeah.
Councilor Frida?
Ray or Roger, I'm not sure who has the answer. We've had this discussion down here before, and I keep getting the same question. There's concern about the older infrastructure and elderly people who have to come up with the dollars if there's an issue in front of their homes, sometimes $5, $6, $7, $10,000. I know the city used to cover that years ago, and it was expensive. Then there was a change back in the 80s when everything was happening. How serious do you think this is in terms of, I guess some of the questions I'm getting are, you get an elderly person with a side street, for an example. It doesn't have to be elderly, a young couple, on a side street that has the 100 feet of frontage that has an issue in front of them. And then you have somebody who's like on North Main Street who has constant traffic in front of their house, which risks infrastructure problems quicker. That costs $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 to fix. And people are responsible. They don't understand how they have to be responsible for what's in the street. I get it. I know how you're doing it, but could there be some relief in there somehow?
Actually,
I
there-
think we need to look at it.
There is. They should purchase that insurance.
Well, if there's a two-family house or somebody owns
Yeah.
two houses together, they can't get it.
Yeah.
So
It's
that
been
needs to change.
very successful for a single family.
Well, how about money made available to help people get that insurance? If that's the case.
The only,
I guess,
the only problem is the other ratepayers will be paying for someone else's service connection. That is kind of like a fine line to walk. I mean, it's something we can discuss. I just don't.
I
have
think
an
we need
easy
to
way
have
to
a discussion
do it.
on it, because there's a lot of people that are afraid, because we've had, how many failings have we had? Quite a few
You're talking
for a
about the
while.
service connections, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but if it's in the street, they have to pay
Right.
what's in the street. And I don't think anybody has a problem taking care of their own property. But then when you get to the end of the line, going into the road, they're
Well, I mean,
responsible for
Yeah, well,
that.
their electric line, their cable, their phone, it's all to the pole. I mean, it's not buried, but I mean, everyone understands that. The main line is the utility. And we can talk about it, but
But the equity, I guess I'm saying, is if you get somebody in a subdivision that has minimal traffic, that might affect that infrastructure, or relatively newer infrastructure. Then you have somebody on North Main Street, or Main Street, or Central Street, that has constant trailer trucks, or ambulances, or something that's constantly on those roads that can affect that infrastructure. Is there an equity issue
I
there?
honestly, I don't think they selectively pick which ones fail. They're all 100 years old. And we see the ones on the side streets fail as easily as the ones with the high traffic area. We talked about, Roger and I have spoken in with some of the guys, that
I know I brought it up
the
before,
flowable
but-
fill situation, we're gonna try to modify. We're not gonna make them use the trench totally to flowable fill. We're gonna compact the bottom half and try to cut that cost somewhat in
'cause
half.
that's pretty expensive.
It is expensive. But I mean, our Chapter 90 money is what it is, and this year we're doing with that
I don't
amount
want
of
to
money.
take
like
anything
10
away from
like 10 roads.
repaving the streets.
Yeah,
I'm not
but,
looking-
so,
But
but my point is, when you cut into one of those brand-new roads, you affect that road where water will get in. That causes failure. So the flowable fill, and it's the trench repair in that application that costs money, that we may be able to, I guess, talk about. I think that'd be probably easier to talk about, is the trench repair itself.
Yeah, I'd like to have a discussion about
Yeah,
that in the
we can do
future.
that.
And I guess my second question would be, we spent a lot of time down here years ago about the chapel and how there was an incredible need to fix that chapel because people wanted to use it for services at the cemetery. I'd like to know how many services there that have been performed there. I don't think there are many.
Well, it's not handicap accessible.
Okay,
And we've hired a structural engineer to look at handicap accessibility to the main building and that chapel. The chapel is going to be very difficult because of the way it's constructed, but we're going to explore.
why would we do that? I guess that's the question. Why
Well-
would we put more money into it when the funeral directors at that point had argued that we were essentially taking money away from them because they have services in their own. I
I mean,
I think that's a.
I get it from both ends, so I'm just trying to make everyone happy, which obviously is not gonna
Well,
happen.
I understand that, but I think it's proven itself over the years that nobody uses that chapel.
Well, if I'm instructed not to go that route, I guarantee you I won't.
Thank you.
Any other member of the council have a question? Seeing none, I'll go to the public. Does the public, any member of the public have a question or comment regarding the Department of Public Works budget, including the water and sewer departments as well? I'll ask again. Does any member of the public have a question or comment regarding the Department of Public Works budget? And a final time. Seeing none, council all set? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Up next is the school department.
Mr. Chairman, before you begin, I'd like to disclose, according to the rules and regulations of the Commonwealth, the appearance of conflict of interest is required by General Law, Chapter 268A, 23B and 3. My wife is a teacher at Samoset, and my daughter is a teacher / guidance counselor at Leominster High School. So I'll try not to ask any questions regarding personnel issues that might affect them or appear to be in conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Perhaps you folks would like to identify yourselves for the public?
Good evening, I'm Glenn Fratto, the District School Business Administrator.
Eileen Griffin, this is School Committee Chair. Paula Deacon, Superintendent.
Michael Stassen, School Committee Member, Chair of Finance Subcommittee.
All right, well, thank you for being with us this evening, and I'll let whoever is going to take the lead start the overview for us.
I'll start the overview. Thank you. I want to say good evening and thank you for this opportunity to provide you with a sound fiscal and ethical FY19 Leominster Public School budget. We've met the experts in the room. They are available for questions. There are no questions that we are afraid to answer, so be as transparent as possible, please. I also want to thank the people in attendance. We have school committee, we have administration, we have staff, and involved community members. I hope you were able to at least browse the bound booklet that was provided last week. And if you're looking for any detail, this is the 4-inch binder. If anybody gets bored this weekend, you can figure out who is abusing the pencil purchase, and I'll leave that with you. I felt it necessary in creating this budget to inform the committee to not only understand our requests, but to also understand our inner workings to be reflective in the history of our financing in support of education. Please note that any document that is in your bound book has been shared publicly over the past 7 months. I ask to call your attention to each tab. The FY18 budget overview has taken our team of the business office, the finance team, building administration, community members, and DESE on a forensic journey in the development of a succinct munis document which depicts past actuals, appropriations, anticipated spendings, and recorded notations of transfers with rationales. We made our movements and thinking visible. Also included in our fiscal planning are considerations of the revolving funds, grants, and HR personnel reports. Our goal is to enhance stability and transparency, safety, not just physical, but social, emotional, and academic safeguards. Equity, in terms of providing consistent programming for all our students. Compliance, accessibility, advancement, and most, accountability. We lived within our means and did not ask for a single appropriation this year. Our budget assumptions are reflective of the times. We have a 6% increase in health insurance, anticipated indirect charges, salary obligations of step, lane, and longevity increases. All contracts are updated and current instructional material costs. On the third tab is the much talked about Chapter 70. Unfortunately for Leominster, and particularly for Leominster, state aid is far from adequate. As a team, we have investigated and analyzed the construction of the formula and can specify the inequities made apparent. It is truly beyond unfair. This point has been restated over and over again throughout the educational forums I attend. The broken formula puts a strain on city funding and is prompting the exposure of the gap between what it truly takes to fund an urban school district such as Leominster versus what is allocated. So, utilizing all our resources, our FY19 request denotes that FY19 salary and wages are still less than 2 years ago, and FY19 expenses are still less than FY18. We have scrutinized every item and cost. Together, our request outside of transportation is $71,824,287,100 to move the dial from Leominster education from adequate to exceptional. Currently, transportation will not be fully funded at the requested amount with a deficit of just under $500,000. An adjustment to the level of service we can provide will be made. Leominster Public Schools will not be able to provide additional funding as in the past outside of McKinney-Vento and bus fees towards this bill due to putting all of our resources directly back into the classroom. The task force is gearing up to evaluate the situation and provide recommendations. We cannot wait until late August to make the changes. Our families need the information as soon as possible to make arrangements and build family schedules. Also, I have provided a line-by-line breakdown of our needs. Our enrollment status is ever-changing, and we are growing. Our staffing back to October 1st of FY16, and all our subgroups, including free and reduced numbers. This financial team has made themselves available 24/7 to provide transparency of our work and dialogue regarding solutions. Moving forward and looking for positive changes in education, after almost 30 years of service and a strong belief in children, I am hopeful as the educational champion for all of our district that we, our city, will one day say, what do the children of Leominster need to be successful, as opposed to saying our district has met net school spending. Thank you very much for your time, attention, and continued support.
Thank you, Superintendent. Clearly, the process this year in terms of the transparency of the information and documentation has taken a giant leap forward, and I'm sure we're all appreciative of that.
Thank you.
Does any other representative want to add anything to the overview before we open it up to questions? Okay, that being said, I'll open it up to the Finance Committee first. Does any member of the Finance Committee have a question?
Sure. First of all, I just want to echo the sentiments of the chairman of our Finance Committee. This is like a complete 180-degree turnaround from what we got last year. I mean, when I asked about a line item budget, I had people looking at me like I had three heads. And, you know, I think we're moving in the right direction. I mean, we should be able to, and maybe we can with your binder that's provided right there, look at everything from pencils to toilet paper to the superintendent's salary and everything else in between. You know, I think it's important, you know, that you can't make improvements when you don't understand how you're spending your money. And I certainly couldn't figure it out last year. So just looking at some of these, some of this detail, I guess and I know you mentioned that you sort of lived within the budget. So, for example, some of the things we heard going on, like the whole fiasco with the janitors, I'm sure it cost quite a bit of money. That was all taken care of within the budget, I'm assuming?
It has. We've paid all our bills.
Okay. So were there any new positions hired this past year?
So we had open positions, and then there were no new positions. So we were in a replacement mode. But we scrutinized every hire to make sure that it was what we truly needed. We tended to hire more paraprofessionals and tutors versus teachers. And the administration worked very closely not to go outside the boundaries.
Okay. So,
Can I add to that? Sure. It's also the case that some of those positions that were open did not end up getting filled, which provided some of the savings that enabled us to pay things like the extra cost for the custodian change and the superintendent severance.
okay. So, I guess at 11:59 p.m. on June 30th, when the fiscal year closes, in your estimation, where are we going to stand? Where are we going to stand? What have we going to have accomplished in the fiscal year? How much are we going to have spent or exceeded on net school spending and things like that? Have you come up with any of those figures yet so that we know where we're going to be?
Go ahead, Michael.
So the exact number for net school spending, of course, won't be known until we do complete our end-of-year report in October. Is when it's supposed to be done. I expect that we will be approximately $1.7 million over net school spending, just as we were last year, because of the $1.3 million in additional funding we received in July. Without that, we would be about 400 and change over net school spending for this year.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay. I think I'm good. I'm good for now.
Councilor Pauline Cormier?
I'm curious of, obviously, I know the committee made a lot of changes to transportation last year as a result of everything that went on. What are we looking at for the coming year, transportation-wise? Are they significant cuts, level cuts, any cuts?
So we have a transportation task force that we are reassembling. We've already communicated with them. And speaking with the mayor, he has proposed on a $5 million bill to give us 3.5 with Medicaid money in addition. We received that number today. The Medicaid is just shy of $1 million. We have McKinney-Vento, approximately $50,000, and bus fees this year around $56,000. So I would say we're somewhere around $400,000 short. We have used in the past, in this past current year, school choice money to put towards that bill. We are putting our school choice money back into the classroom this year. We will not be able to put monies towards a $400,000 debt. So we are going to see how we can do this with the least amount of impact to families.
Okay, but you have a separate task force that's going to deal specifically.
Yes.
But each bus from first student costs, we expect $77,500 next year per bus. They run, on average, 3 different runs, like pick up, go to one school, then another, then another. So it's going to take quite a few of those to make up that amount of money.
Okay.
So we'll be as creative as we can be, but there's not any way to maintain the same level of service with less money. Not that big a gap.
And can we expect, and you can tell me if you can't answer this question at this point, but the transportation effects would affect mostly the high school, the older kids?
Right. The state law requires that we transport special ed kids who have that in their IEP. We are required to transport kindergarten through 6th grade. We're only required if they're more than 2 miles from school, but not that, there are a lot of kids who are a little bit closer than 2 miles to their elementary school, but it's not really safe. Their path to walk there isn't safe. So I believe we go closer than 2 miles. We're not required to transport 7th grade through 12th grade, not under law. We've been doing it. We think it's important. We expect that not transporting high school students will have an effect on the dropout rate. There are kids who, they don't really have another way to get there besides the bus. But as far as state regulations, that's the place we're allowed to cut service, is 7th grade through 12th grade.
Okay, okay. I'd be interested to see where you, when you come down in that area in particular. Thank you.
There's also, I mean, in terms of trying to make up $400,000 worth of transportation expenses, I guess you have to start with the proposition that a lot of that expense is special education busing.
At least
So-
2.5.
So it's about 2.5 million
I was
of
going
the
to say it's
five,
about
yes.
half of the
Yep.
total budget, right? So making those cuts, you got to make a lot of cuts in the non-special education busing to make up $400,000, I guess is my point.
Exactly.
I don't know, but has anybody in recent times looked at the potential of hiring or obtaining a consultant to look at how we do our special education transportation?
We did have a consultant analyze our transportation and give us a report. We received the report, Glenn, what, a year and a half ago? I mean, we looked at it in the Transportation Task Force a year ago.
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
Less than that? Okay.
Less than that.
About
Did
14.
they actually,
Which
Yes.
I'm
included
trying to remember, they
special
included
ed.
special ed, yes.
Yes, they did.
We did use a state grant to hire the Massachusetts Student Public Transportation Group to review our special ed volume. They reviewed it, says the pricing that we're paying was about average, and the efficiency was average. However, that group also made other recommendations to us, and partially funded through a grant for regular transportation. And based on those recommendations, we did eliminate 3 buses this year, and eliminated about 10% of our bus stops. I can't imagine, and I'm the one who gets the phone calls, from the superintendent's office. I'm also the one who gets the phone calls when parents are upset that whose sidewalks have been installed, and now the students have to walk to school. But on the one hand, it's wonderful the kids can walk, but parents are used to having their children picked up, even if they live a half a mile or a mile from the school. So it was a difficult year explaining to people, 1, that we consolidated bus stops, 2, eliminated many, 3, had more walkers, and 4, we charge a fee. Our fee is very nominal, but when you don't pay a fee, K to 6, all of a sudden you have a student in the 7th grade, you asked to pay $100. People aren't happy about that, especially when the majority of our students don't have to pay, even 7 through 12, because they're eligible for free and reduced lunch. And ultimately, when you look at the foundation formula, I won't talk about that this year, but we get an incremental funding increase in the foundation budget for students who are economically disadvantaged because it costs more to educate them, just like it costs more to educate English language learners. Unfortunately, the state made a change in how it funded Chapter 70 this year.
Right.
And the change was it reduced funding for economically disadvantaged students. So where we would have gotten an additional $820,000 that they left the formula alone, we didn't get the money.
Yeah, I want to, I mean, I had the pleasure of discussing some of this with Mr. Stassen, who was very helpful. And I want to applaud the effort that the school department made in identifying those economically disadvantaged students, which I think has moved the needle significantly from what it was in the past. Unfortunately, as you said, at the same time, I mean, it's really quite fortuitous you did that because it'd be even worse, right?
Yes, yes.
So having independently did some research on other school funding equity litigation historically, has there been a thought to getting involved in litigation with respect to the formula? Because it seems to me we're at the point now where it's getting from bad to absurd.
So part of my urban superintendent meetings, we have contacted legal, and Brockton has already started the process. Worcester has jumped in, and it would be in the best interest of Leominster. And Leominster's name comes out of almost everybody's mouth when they talk about Chapter 70 as one of the most unfair treated districts. So there is definitely movement.
You'd be interested to know that the shift of money from disadvantaged districts to wealthier districts is not just limited to Massachusetts.
Right.
It's also happening in other states, which is befuddling. That problem, plus I guess the deficit in the transportation budget, are really the big issues
That's the
in
deficit,
this year's challenge. So I know, I appreciate the idea that we're not going to take money out of the classroom. I appreciate the idea that we're not going to deficit spend, and I guess that doesn't leave a whole lot of options, I guess, right?
Correct.
All right. I'll open it up to questions, council in general. Council Frida?
Just to answer your question about possible litigation, I did check last Tuesday. There seems to be an issue with, I think Brockton was one of the first ones. They've already been told that you can't use taxpayer money to pursue a litigation. So there's a holdup, because I asked for a template, and we talked about that. And right now, you can't do that. So they're trying to, and this comes from the Mass Association of School Committees. So, they can't do it right now until they straighten out how they're going to fund it and how they're going to go about the next step. So that's where that is right now. And it's going to hold up a lot of communities because everybody wants to jump on board. It's certainly a way to correct it. I'd be interested, though, and this is certainly no disrespect to Mr. Sasson, but I want to hear from the business manager what your thoughts are in terms of how the finances go. I mean, you have a chair, you have a superintendent, you have a business manager. I'd like to hear what your opinion is, as far as a business manager, where you think things should go.
Okay. I'm in a much different situation sitting here this year than I was last year, when we felt the need to try and claw additional funds. And extremely appreciative that the mayor and city council did come back in July and provide an additional $1.3 million. Had you not done so, I can't imagine where we'd be right now. And you also provided $895,000 to make sure that we didn't end FY17 in a deficit. So extremely appreciative for that. When the new superintendent came on board in November, she basically said, that ain't happening again, that we are not going to end the year with a deficit. So you do whatever you can, and we have. Ministers throughout the school district have done what they could. We've had issues that have not helped us, but we also had one positive benefit. Like Michael said earlier, some positions weren't filled, so we didn't fill them. We also had a savings in unemployment compensation, and any savings that were found, the Finance Committee considered proposals by the superintendent to add back some positions. And that was done during the course of the year. But we purposely aimed to come up end the year in the black. Not too much in the black, just a little bit.
Very little.
But we don't have to add. We're there. I'm on an urban school business administrators roundtable, and our last meeting was in June at the Fidelity Bank conference room down the street. And I was there with my counterparts from Chicopee, Fall River, Brockton, Haverhill, communities that are roughly similar to us. And we had a presentation by Mass Budget and Policy, which clearly showed that Leominster is, for some reason, is always at the short end of the stick when it comes to both the foundation budget calculation and our aid. At the end of that meeting, I asked the group, how many districts here just get the minimum aid per pupil? And they started laughing at me, because the only districts that get minimum aid per pupil are the wealthier districts. Leominster's got the minimum aid per pupil for the last 4 years. Next year will be the 5th year. It simply means that Leominster is not considered Pittsfield, Chicopee, Holyoke, Brockton. It's considered to be slightly wealthier than those communities, or its ability to pay is slightly higher. I'm glad we're no longer arguing whether or not net school spending is adequate, and that the superintendent says we need to provide more than adequate. But there's so much information, I won't bore you to tears. Bonanza likes listening to this stuff. And by the way, if the communities that want to challenge the budget formula can find a pro bono attorney to do it, that could really make their name in helping fighting for communities. I don't know if you know any attorneys around that are interested in this subject. That'd be certainly, that'd be
John
certainly,
just crawled under the table.
we'll provide all the information you need. But we're caught between a rock and a hard place. The community is not considered as poor as others. However, our students are. The majority of our students are eligible for free and reduced education. I don't know if you heard what happened at the school committee meeting, last two meetings. We're eligible for community eligibility provision, but we can provide free and reduced breakfasts, K through 6.
And lunch.
Breakfast and lunch for all students.
Regardless of their income.
That's because so many of our students are considered economically disadvantaged. There's been a significant change in the demographics of the students who attend our schools over the last 20 years, and it's coming to fruition now. I used to be a town manager. I used to be the one who presented budgets to town meetings. And I can attest, and I said this last year, the work that Mayor Mazzarella and Comptroller Richard do is amazing to me. The financial condition of this city is amazing. The bond rating, the amount of funds you have in your stabilization fund, your annual free cash, the way you're funding your pension reserves is something this community should be very, very proud of. However, the funding for the school department leaves a little bit to be desired. And as I sit here to you, the one recommendation I would make is please try and find a way to help provide student transportation to every student that gets it this year. And that's it. Just like we did this year, we'll find a way. But if there is no other source other than what's been appropriated or proposed by the mayor, using McKinney-Vento funds, using the user fees, even dedicating Medicaid reimbursement funds towards it, there's still $500,000 approximately of funds. And that's without cost increases. We eliminated buses. We reduced the cost of the van pool transportation, which is $1.4 million. We froze that going back 2 years. There's not much more we can do to reduce those expenses. It's just that that's the one area that we need help. That's what I'd say.
Eliminating buses creates another problem, though. You have a dropout issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on the school committee 30 years ago, and the conversation hasn't changed.
Correct.
The school, but I sat on the Foundation Budget Review Commission in 2000, and that formula didn't work then. It doesn't work now. And we're not the only ones. You take the Cape and most of those communities, they're land rich and income poor. You get retirees that can't pay to put their kids through school. So it's an ongoing issue, but you deal with one problem and you create another one. You know, and dropout prevention was a real serious issue back then in terms of cutting some of the buses to the high school. You know, talked about advertising. Is that a consideration again to look at possibly advertising on the buses in good taste and school related?
They're not our buses.
Huh?
They're not our buses.
I know that, but there could be a conversation for a student. There used to be more competitive bus companies too that you could deal with. Now you don't have that.
And paying prevailing wage, just like folks here earlier, you have to pay prevailing wage. It adds 30 to 40% of the cost. And you know, the one thing we did ask for in the budget, we only asked for one vehicle. We asked for $50,000 so we could buy a used big bus. And if you may not be aware, but the last time the school department has purchased a vehicle was in 2008. We make do with what we have. We've purchased used buses with 100,000 miles on them that we have up at the high school. We bought 4 used small buses that a certain towing company in this town does a great job maintaining for us, along with the staff at the high school. And those four vehicles cost less than one van. And you'll see them all around town. Very frugal, very efficient the way this city is managed. And I'm very proud to be sitting at this table with these people right here. And I'm hopeful that you will take under consideration the request to fully fund transportation, however you do it.
Yeah, I'm good for now, thank you.
Counselor Feckley?
Superintendent, last year, a big concern was classroom size. How are we doing this year?
So we're impacted because we didn't bring back many teachers. So classroom size is quite large, but with this budget that we've put forth, we did not pink slip any classroom. We could not afford to do that. Thank goodness, because we did not anticipate the displaced students showing up. Since October 1st, almost 450 students entered, and we kept about 250, very transient, in, out. Although we reported on October 1st, 6,005 students, we're sitting at about 6,300 right now. So we're growing, and we had our first kindergarten registration, and the trend was that we weren't going to continue to grow. It was our largest registration. We are already over last year's October 1 by at least 50. We've exited out our seniors that just graduated, almost 500 students. We have about that size going in as a freshman class. And K, already about 300 have registered, and it's early. So we're a little nervous about that.
So for some reason, our community really can't take advantage of the demographics that are coming through that say maybe the numbers are going to go down. We just keep
They're
on
not
getting
going
them
down. And we have a waiting list on our school choice to come in. So we are a marketable school district.
Yeah.
People want in, and especially our kindergarten. Our surrounding communities are begging. Our preschools are begging to come in. So we know that people want to be here. I do anticipate us having a large enrollment next year.
Well, in some ways, it's a good problem to have.
It's, yes.
And in other ways, you need to be
Yes,
funded. So
we've
that
been
you take
talking
care of
about
it.
that. It's about
Right.
trying to keep that balance. The good news is people want to be here. The bad news, everybody wants to be here. If we can't afford to get an adequate classroom size.
And I also want to say that I appreciate that we have a more stable environment for this budget this year. I mean, last year it was very volatile, but you could almost tell as the budget season was coming, you could see the vibe that things were going to be, more transparent and a little bit more relaxed. So I really appreciate everything everybody's done to add to that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Question? Counselor Dabrowski?
Did you have to cut any programs this year as far as affecting students? This coming year?
No, moving forward, no, we did not cut programs. Actually, in the budget, I have put in 10 additional positions, which are really safeguards around equity. I'm trying to bring back art and music at the middle school so that it is equitable and every student can have the affordability of art and music. We have asked for a librarian for accreditation that's coming up. We've asked for 3 deans, not 4, for security. It really is apparent that that level of support in the buildings is necessary. So if we could have 1 at the high school and 1 at either middle school and a handful of classroom teachers. That's all we've asked, just to maintain. It's a respectful move in the right direction, and administration and staff has been very forthcoming, and they've worked hand in hand with me throughout this whole process. And I said the biggest thing we can do moving forward is to get stable and see where we're at and continue to grow from there. So asking for those 10 positions, although it wasn't a huge jump, it will be a huge impact to our schools to bring it back.
And are you able to tell me what the 10 positions were or
So,
are?
yes, 3 deans. Art and music, I'd love to have health back in the middle school. It's extremely important. A librarian for the high school for accreditation. An assistant superintendent. We have to have an ELL director. There is a state regulation that we have to have that in there. So those would be the 10.
Okay. And then with respect to the art and the music issue, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Last year, Skyview, in order to lower the risk for students in classrooms, they were looking at classroom sizes of anywhere up to 42 to 45. So administration had, to save classroom teachers, cut into the arts. Was it the best move? No, and it was nothing that anybody wanted to do. All of those specials are what keep students connected. There's something that happens in specials that don't happen anywhere else. It's like athletics. It's another spot where students just seem to shine. And so when you take those possibilities away, it just hampers where they go next. So we tried to put some things in place, and Skyview did a nice job having an after-school band. But then you look at transportation. Can students stay after school? That becomes a burden on families. Art, they talked about bringing in outside support and sponsors to do things within the school day, but that gets difficult to juggle. Trying to plan and schedule for 900 middle school students, if you ever get bored, go up there, middle school stuff, it became cumbersome. You could have a gym class of 60 students because you have to cover specials. So it's imperative that we put that back. It's actually my first move as soon as this budget goes through.
Okay, so what exactly are we talking about? Hiring
A music teacher
a
back?
music teacher and an art teacher?
And an art teacher,
I see. Okay, and
To
that's at
start.
Skyview?
Skyview. And then
Alright.
all schools will be equitable.
Okay, and then with regard to school choice outnumbers, how did those look last year?
They went down somewhat.
Okay.
And I am anticipating that to take a significant decrease. I'm hoping the work that we've done this year is going to hold our residents here, and that we want to keep our students. We see the success when we hold on to them. Being a part of this graduation class on June 2nd and seeing number 1 and 2, who have been in our district since they were in K, go to Princeton and Yale and Harvard, that speaks volumes for what Leominster Public Schools offers. So if we can hold our own students and replicate that, I'm all for it.
Okay, and I know there was talk in the past about like exit information, and I don't know how valuable that is if you're getting honest answers or answers that help
Oh,
you.
I'm getting honest answers.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
what are if you could just talk a little bit about that. I mean, how do you address concerns that are raised by students that are choosing to leave? Like, what exactly is being done?
So I've done it with students and staff.
Okay.
And I've done it on the positive and the negative. So even students that are just graduated, I asked to speak to an array of students just to tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then students that were leaving, it came down to really varied issues. The ones that were negative about leaving, it could have been the lack of a arts program or music or exposure. Some students didn't like the large class size and just didn't feel that they were comforted in there. Could have been an athletic issue. So there were multiple reasons on the negative. The students that we graduated that spoke with me spoke really highly of our school system. They felt that their teachers cared about them. They felt part of a community. They actually, the biggest trend was that they were proud. And that felt really good. Employees that have left, both positive and negative, shared sort of the same elements. The things that were cumbersome were large class sizes, the stress, the demands, the accountability. Teaching has become very forensic, and trying to stay in touch with all of the needs, when you have 35 students, it's difficult. And the expectation that you are connected to each and every child, it does compound the issues. So teachers were looking for support. Tutors were overworked. They were tired. They wanted more support, more help. So it was very common to what the students were saying as well.
Yeah, I was at the graduation ceremonies this year, and
Oh,
it was a very nice feel.
Fantastic, fantastic.
So,
Very proud of that.
If I can just add a number to that. In FY17, we were charged off of our cherry sheet $2,710,000. Students who lived in Leominster chose to go elsewhere. This year, that number has dropped to $2,310,000, a drop of $340,000.
That's good.
And we see that trend continuing into next year. So the students, despite the concerns we had during the budget process last year, that a lot of students would leave, that's not what happened. It's the exact opposite. More students are choosing to stay in Leominster.
I'm good
What's
for
that,
now.
Counselor?
Yep.
I noticed from the revolving account schedules, so it looks like you started the FY18 fiscal year with 3.3 million, and you project to end up with just a little over 3 million. Can you, I know you sort of want to use that money for a classroom and not transportation, you made that pretty clear, but sort of what's the plan going forward in terms of not only the use of these funds, but where you project them going as we get into the fiscal year?
Most of those funds can only be utilized for the purpose in which the funds were raised. So you see a very large amount of money available in the school lunch program.
Yeah.
Our school lunch program right now runs a profit. So that balance increases. So any improvements we need to make to the equipment in our kitchens or the service areas, that's paid for out of that fund. So all of our capital repairs, just like the water and sewer department, it's paid out of the revenues being generated. Another big line item is creative choices, which is called something different there. It's our before and after school programs. They also run at a huge surplus.
Is that the daycare fees?
Yes. Yes.
820,000 you're projecting on that?
But you can only, and that they pay their rent for the facility, what they use, and they pay all their staff costs, including health insurance. But we're very efficient. It's a very popular program. Superintendent has asked that they purchase some technology out of those funds. You'll see that. There's also the Kendall Trust Fund. We just received a check this week of $66,000 from that trust fund that allows the high school in particular to use that for funds, expenses that are not included in the general fund
Thank you,
budget.
J. Henry Kendall.
Yeah. So it must be, if they get $66,000 a year, must be a nice hunk of change sitting somewhere.
I think it was established in 1862.
So the high school benefits from that, and the finance committee often has requests like for purchasing equipment for the band, for lighting for the auditorium, et cetera.
Graduation
Graduation in particular.
costs.
Sending teachers to AP programs during the summer. Two big accounts: school choice and circuit breaker. As you're probably aware, circuit breaker is reimbursement you get from the state for very high cost special ed students. And most districts have a policy trying to save one full year's reimbursement as a reserve fund in case you get real high need students coming into a district. I once worked in a district where we had 2 students move from a community near here into the community I was working. $600,000 in tuition we were hit with in 1 year because the parents moved, the kids were in residential treatment. So rather than having to come for supplemental appropriation or cutting the budget for something like that, you have a reserve fund. It's especially established by the state. We usually use that, fully utilize that reserve fund. We've had to the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I guess 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big amount in there, but that's been drained down every year.
So you started the year in a deficit, in that account, a small one,
Yeah.
$22,000, and now
That's-
you're projecting 450?
It will be less than that. That was when we did this. We have about 4 or 5 students have gone out in the last month to out-of-district programs.
Okay.
And we'll also have school choice. And historically, that money did not go to the classroom. That money went towards transportation or health insurance. Under the direction of the finance committee and the superintendent, the decision has been made to try and utilize those funds for the purpose which they were raised. Medicaid reimbursement intended to provide services to students eligible for Medicaid services, and school choice to pay for the teachers and other classroom activities for those students from other districts. It's just a change in philosophy,
Yeah, I get it.
and the mayor partially supports that.
Okay. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, special donations, what is that?
I wish I could answer that question, because it's been, for years, that money's been sitting in there.
Well, that's 227,000. Would there be any thought to using that to help bridge the gap here?
I think we need to get a legal
Transportation.
opinion as to, because that was money, as I understand it, I wasn't here, just like, it's like the Kendall Fund, something that's been sitting there. Monies were raised for certain purposes. We spend small amounts of money because we know what it's for, like the Kendall Fund.
Yeah.
But it would be great to get a legal opinion as to how we can utilize that money. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, any other members of the council have questions? Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Superintendent. You answered one of my questions, something that I was very concerned about, and that was really establishing equity back at Skyview, because those programs took a hard hit, and those students, I think, had a very tough year. So I'm happy to hear that. The health program, health curriculum, is not in the middle school, either of the schools?
Neither, it was cut.
I'm very concerned about that.
That's
Middle
on the
school,
list.
okay, middle school students, it's not in this budget.
It is.
Oh, it is?
There's 2 health teachers on there. It says art, music, and 2 health.
Okay, so they are included in this
They-
budget?
They are.
So
The
art,
first-
music?
The
okay.
first step is art and music. I need to restore those immediately.
Okay.
To get the first level of equity.
Mhm.
If there is enough money, once we make all of our moves, it would be health in the middle schools.
Well, great. I think that that's critically
Oh,
important. I mean, these kids need health curriculum.
I
There's no
taught
question
middle
about
school
it.
for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Health is really
Yes.
important in middle school.
It is. No, it really is. So I have a couple of questions. I just want to go through some of the numbers so that I understand where things are going. So I'm not looking at the wonderful presentation. I did go through that a couple of times, actually, and that is great information, and thank you very much for providing that. So I'm looking at the budget book that the mayor provided to us, and in the school summary, the numbers look pretty close. The school department salary and expense number is $47,194,630. That's the same in both the department request and the mayor's budget. The expense line item is $21,476,658 in the department request, and $21,156,651 in the mayor's budget. So I did the quick math. It looks like a $320,000 reduction in the
Correct.
expense line.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to double check, okay. So that's correct. And then we go down to the transportation line, 4.9 million is the department request, that's the actual cost. And the mayor's budget is 3.5 million, and that's a $1.4 million reduction, right?
Correct.
Then crossing guards are the same at $40,000 and expenses, so the difference between the budget that the school department submitted and the mayor submitted to us is 1.7 million. Okay. So the $320,000 in expense cuts, do you know where you're making those? Or have you, no.
There's a communication before us, I think, to be voted on Monday night for $265,000 from fiscal year 19 revenue to school expenses. I can tell you.
Do we know what that's for?
It's school expenses.
Are those prior year expenses, or are they, no, they're not
No.
prior year expenses. Okay, so they may go to offset some of this
That'll make the
$320,000.
delta about $55,000, if I'm not mistaken, right, Michael?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll put us very close on the
Expense?
net school spending part, on the expenses part. And it'll be close enough, I think we'll figure out a way to deal with that.
To deal with the
It's really
55.
just the transportation piece.
Okay.
Because we don't have other sources for that.
Okay, so in terms of transportation, so the $1.4 million transportation deficit, the $1 million Medicaid reimbursement, that's going towards that?
That's our understanding.
That's our understanding.
Okay, I want to go on the record as being, that's really inappropriate. The Medicaid money is a reimbursement for services that people in the schools have been providing students. That is a reimbursement of expenses that should go back to the schools. I think that that's very important for people to understand, and I think it's very important for everybody here to consider. McKinney-Vento, that is for homeless children, for their transportation, that's $50,000. That makes perfect sense. And then bus fees of $56,000, that is another offset to the transportation deficit, and that makes perfect sense too. Okay. So I guess one of my concerns is that $1 million in Medicaid reimbursement that really should be going back to the classroom for actual services that have been provided to the students in those classrooms and in those schools that need that money. Okay, So with the Medicaid money, so that still leaves a $500,000 deficit, and that's why, approximately.
Yep.
And that's why the conversation is about whether or not to bus high school students,
Correct.
which we all know could potentially be a serious problem because we do have at-risk students, and we don't want our dropout rate to increase.
No.
Because it's been going in the right direction for the last several years. Okay. Okay, I wanted to just make sure that I really understood that where the Medicaid money was being proposed to go and what the deficit looks like at this stage. Thank you.
Counselor Frida?
Yeah, just to add to Counselor to my right's comments, it's a balancing act. You have $1 million that's going for transportation. If you put it to where it's meant to go, you're $1 million short. So are you thinking that it should come out of the city side?
Absolutely.
And that goes into our general fund as a rule. The Mass Association of School Committees for years tried to get that changed. Every year they put it in, and the legislature doesn't do it. I mean, it's just something that's not going to happen. It goes into the general fund with every mayor. 99% of the mayors turn it over to the school committee. So, I mean, that's not a new problem. And it's not a new issue. Something that happens every year.
Right. I don't think it's a new issue. I don't think it's a new problem. But it's an ongoing problem that I think people need to recognize and understand. And the decision whether or not we're going to bus high school students who are at-risk students depends on having the conversation about that $1 million in Medicaid money. So it's not new. I don't care what other mayors do. The legislature needs to get its act together and perhaps make it go back to the school departments. Should it go to the general fund? Maybe not. I don't think so. And that's not a conversation for here, but it's just a comment. It's not a new problem. It's not a new issue. That's just my
Well,
position on it.
If the money went to the expense side of the budget, that would push our net school spending number to 2.7 million plus, which under the current budgetary constraints, I don't think is going to happen, unfortunately. So you could spend the Medicaid reimbursement money for school expenses, and you're going to get, instead of a mayor's budget of $21,156,000, you're going to get $20,156,000. And then the money that was in the expense side can just get pushed to the transportation side. I understand where you're coming from, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about money. So, if you're asking for an additional $1 million, not that we have any choice in the matter, that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we just, at the end of the day, we have a whole bunch of other departments with needs, and we have taxpayers too to consider. So, I agree. I mean, I don't think it. Fortunately, in Leominster, we've never had a problem with it being retained for the general fund purposes, so that's good, at least. But at the end of the day, it's how much you're going to spend over and above your net school spending requirement.
Well, that's a conversation that, I think that the superintendent, her point certainly to me was very well taken. Let's get to the point where we're not talking about net school spending and only being at net school spending. And what teeny tiny percentage can we get over net school spending so that we can say we're over it? Let's really have a conversation, and that's where I'd like to get about what does the district need?
Well,
And in the context of the overall budget and the overall financial shape that the city is in.
Well, I don't think 1.7 is a teeny amount.
I don't know what that is in terms of a
especially
percentage.
Especially historically.
Right.
And it's, look at more is, I guess when it comes to money and you're running a district, more is better, right, Superintendent?
Anytime.
So,
So let me we're not talking about 1.7 for next year, though. The mayor suggested 1.3. That's based on an estimate of indirect charges of 6 million. I think it's going to be more like 5.8 million. So I think we're looking at about, I would estimate 1.1 million over net school spending for next year versus the 1.7.
still
this year.
historically more than we've had over that target in a long time.
Correct.
the public should at least understand that. I'm not, look, you can
No,
develop whatever policy perspective you have on where the budget should be, but I think at least the public should understand the historical piece as well as where we are. But, you know, we all know that part of the problem is we're not getting, if we were getting the kind of aid that we would have, based on increasing those disadvantaged students, we'd be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, millions.
All the way across the
Yep.
board. And I mean, it's a balancing act at the end, unfortunately, and
And I guess I just would want to point out, because I don't know if all the public is aware of that, the transportation cost is non-net school spending. We can't
Right.
use
Does
any
not qualify.
foundation, funding to pay for transportation. So
Right.
that gives us, little options.
options, very
And
few
it really,
options.
that's why it seems to always fall back on
Yeah.
the city side of things, because
Right.
we don't have the ability to pay for it.
And that's a very important point, because other communities do bus their students. I mean, Fitchburg buses everybody, just as a case in point. I mean, that's something that we know. So you're right, it does not count towards net school spending. Every other community in the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, has to bus their kids, figure out how to get them to school. So it's something that certainly we have to struggle with, and it's something that we have to take care of.
It shouldn't even be a conversation.
It shouldn't, no.
Because students can't learn if they're not there. And we really need to get our students there. We don't have public transportation and other avenues for them.
Councilor Frida?
Just an aside on the same comment. I don't know how many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I have to look at who the superintendent was. Actually was so upset about not getting Medicaid money to the proper place, and had the same discussion, that she would not apply for it. The school system's got to apply for the money. She didn't apply for it because the mayor wouldn't give her somebody to do the work and do all the paperwork in order to get the money back. So it took a long time to change that mindset. I mean,
It's a ton of work.
like-
It's a ton of work. And now it's so time sensitive. You have to report within a 24-hour instead of a week or 2 weeks. So the person we employ to go and get that money, it is nonstop, and she's in panic mode constantly.
Okay, any other questions from the council? Councilor Marchant?
I would be remiss without weighing in a little bit. I have never been, this is not political, this is from the heart, I have never been so proud of our school department as I am sitting here tonight. It is amazing what you have done. We have 2 new members who have taken on a major, major issue for education in this city that are new on the committee. We have veterans that have weighed in on it. Superintendent, you haven't been here a year. We're getting more out of you and your committee. This is just unbelievable, and you should be truly commended for it. I think the bleeding has stopped,
Thank you.
and I think the whole community feels that way. We owe you, the school committee, and you, the administration, a debt of gratitude. What you have done is absolutely remarkable.
I appreciate that.
So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I have to play a little Jeopardy with you. I'm going to go for athletics for 500.
Oh, yeah. I'll give it to you for
Mr.
425.
Houle knows that, I'm good friends with his son, so he knows that it has to come forward. But I just want to share with you, food for thought, okay, because we all know where we are in town here, and not to pit one against the other. However, there is a booster club in a school district nearby that has $175,000 in their coffers from fundraising. That money offsets boys and girls sports equally every time the school department has a need. So if the boys basketball wants to get new uniforms, they get them for the girls. And without hesitation, that's how it plays out. They're building a new turf field with a track. As we speak, the shovel went into the ground about 3 weeks ago. They have a full-time physical therapist / trainer that's paid for on staff. He takes care of a lot of the kids who you've identified tonight are economically deprived. They can't get to a Ramsey rehab, things like that. 100% of their spring sports teams made postseason, 100%. Their baseline budget, which is only 37% of the commitment from the town, with fees collected is $325,000. That's their baseline, 37%. We depend on users' fees, but at the end of the day, you've done a great job trying to collect them, but that, the disparity continues to grow. And we see that every day. And that's okay, because we have an obligation to be able to deal with that. That's not a problem. Athletics is dropout prevention. Today I spoke to a kid going into a senior year next year who's not playing football next fall. And it's dropout prevention. It was for me, it was for a lot of your kids, and it's for a lot of the kids we have here in the community. So something, food for thought for the school committee. We have no jurisdiction at all about policy. I just wanted to share that with you. I'm concerned about technology in a capital outlay plan that brings us to where we need to be. Not just a little bit of pittance once in a while to try to catch up, but something that's significant. There are school districts where every single kid has a laptop, or they have an iPad. They have Schoology. They have Power School. They're all connected. They connect with parents. It's bilingual. It's actually any language you want to send home, with a very simple adjustment. And I've used it, and it works out great. I'm very pleased the direction you're moving with your school safety. We need to continue to move in that direction. But part of that is also mental health services for our students that are having some very difficult times in their own personal lives once they leave the school. And if there's anything you can do to try to work in that area, it's very much appreciated. So, without anything else really to add to it, thank you for everything you've done. You guys are remarkable. Some of the school committee members have been around a very long time. They've stepped up, and the new ones that have come on board, you've done a great job, and this city is very proud of you, and I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Okay, Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yeah, one quick question. Yeah, to follow up on that, do you have a capital plan? I mean, do you have a separate capital budget?
We do.
Okay,
We do. 5 years out.
5 years out?
And so we go and we look at it all the time, and we could add to it at any moment.
Okay, all right. I'd be interested in that.
Sure.
So, thank you. I'll get a copy.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Does any member of the public have a question, comment? Step right up. To the
So I write notes, and then everyone talks, and they're all thrown off again. But so Melissa Bible, 178 5th Street, and I'm here to talk about the equity, compliance, and safety that we're requesting for the budget. It's obvious upon review that the budget that was requested from the school administration was lean. There's no fluff to the budget. Over the past year, the district has worked very hard with what they were given. Students, parents, teachers, administrators, volunteers have gone above and beyond to provide what is best for our kids. What's best for our kids is what's best for our community. However, with the budget that was given, there was injustice and inequity in our district. Services were unequally provided based on the side of town that you lived on. The schools with the most kids, the most low-income kids, the most ELL kids, the most diverse population got less, separate and unequal. This budget will provide more equity through the district, and I'm incredibly thankful. Leominster has a long history of issues with special ed. If you're unsure, ask around. Ask parents of special ed kids, teachers, administrators. Ask any medical professional that works with a child from Leominster. Separate and unequal. This budget works to restore compliance. Our world and our schools have become more dangerous, more violent, and have more complex environments. This budget looks to restore some of the safety needed by restoring 3 deans. However, what it is unable to do, based on what is budgeted, is to make sure that all of our kids can get to school and home from school safely. Do we all remember what busing looked like at the beginning of the year? How it still looks now? Buses are currently overcrowded. Kids can't get home from school all the time right now. It's a beautiful night out. When we think of kids walking 1 to 2 miles or the entire way home, don't think of the weather tonight. Think of the weather in February when schools around us closed because we didn't want kids waiting at the bus stops because it was unsafe. Now imagine kids walking home in the dark or in the freezing cold. And that's what our district is saying is good enough right now. Leominster has made amazing things happen this year, and I'm incredibly proud of everyone. Athletics, musicals, theater programs, and we should be proud of them, and we should acknowledge them. But let's not falsely pat ourselves on the back yet, when all we really want is equity, compliance, and safety, and our city won't fund that.
Thank you, Melissa. Would anybody, other member of the public like to make a comment?
Sorry. Hi, Sue Kohler, school committee member. I just wanted to point out or make a correction to the revolving account statement that you made. We started the year with $3.3 million, but we had expenses from the prior year of $1.1 million. So we really started the year with $2.1 million in the revolving, and we're ending with $3 million, which is $800,000 above last year. And I think that's an important thing to note. And also, I wanted to make the comment about circuit breaker. Circuit breaker works similar to Medicaid reimbursement, where children generate the money. The difference is Medicaid goes directly to the general fund. Circuit breaker comes to us. I just want to note that we are keeping a large balance of almost $500,000 in circuit breaker this year, which means we're drawing those same students that are drawing that money or giving us that money. We're taking that money out of the general fund rather than expending it out of circuit breaker. So I think that's an important thing to note as well. Thank you.
Susan. And would any other member of the public like to make a comment?
Good evening, Bonnie Budd, 321 Prospect Street. Thank you all for being here and for all your hard work, I'll start off by saying. I'm standing here to request you approve the school budget before you as submitted by the mayor and presented by Superintendent Deacon and very wonderfully explained by Mr. Fratto. Perfect picture. We want to make sure that we do not make any further cuts to this budget as originally presented tonight. Our students' futures and success lies in those numbers. I stand here to advocate for students of all abilities to have access to an education where education is the building block to a child's future for independent living, post-secondary education, employment, and community participation. If we stop this funding and strip it down to bare bones, you start to erase dreams. Without a full yes vote to fully fund the budget the way it's presented tonight, as you know, you may see cuts to transportation. Some children will not be able to make it to the school building due to limited access to alternative means of transportation. You see this in the 58% of our students who are on free and reduced lunch. The numbers are there. So that will then lead to truancy and then large dropout rates, which is a domino effect on the school's ability to fund the budget. We also do not want a repeat of last year, as echoed by other people here tonight. We need to establish equal educational opportunities to all schools, unlike today where Skyview students do not have art, health, and band, even though that exists at Samoset, minus health. I'll wrap up again by saying please vote yes to the school budget as presented with no cuts, and do right by our students by giving them a bright future of endless possibilities to look forward to. And thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Budd.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Lappinen, and I live at 32 Valley View Road, Leominster. And thank you so much, Paula, Deacon, and everyone. My son is in band, and seeing the cuts at Skyview of not having a band teacher, that's really impacted things. So I'm very happy to hear that that will be replaced. Now, as far as I would like to support a vote to approve the budget, but also would request that we find ways to be able to make sure every student can get to school. I live over by Whalum, where Whalum Park used to be. It's about 6 miles. My son would love to ride his bike to school, but I don't think that's a good idea. It would take 2 hours for him to walk. My father rides his bicycle to school, to work, almost every day that he can. He's in his 70s. He's been hit twice, once on Hamilton Street. I don't think that's a safe idea. I work in Worcester at North High School, where we have a lot of walkers, and when there's really cold weather, There's a lot of absences. We need to find a way for these students to get there. And I don't know how I can get to work at North High School in Worcester and get my son to school at Leominster High when I have to be there for 7 a.m. So please find a way to fund this and please vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member of the public have a comment?
Good evening, Carrie Noseworthy, 95 Smith Street. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'd like to echo the kudos that everybody else has mentioned for the superintendent and the work that the school committee has done for this year. I think the work that they've done in the short span of time is just absolutely phenomenal. I'm so glad to hear the word equity spoken as many times as it has been tonight, because quite honestly, before tonight, I don't think that I had heard it spoken of that often. I'd like to call some attention just to some numbers. Nationwide, disability community is about 17 to 20% of any given population. 24% of our students access special education. I really want you to think about that number. 24% of our students access special education. That is far above and beyond what a lot of other communities experience. 58% of our students can access free and reduced lunch. 58% of your students that attend the schools can access free and reduced lunch. Now, that's not even the people that missed it by $50 and counting them, okay? I think Leominster is about 40% home ownership. And I guess what I'm getting at here is equity, equity, equity. As was already mentioned, and this has been a long time coming, the equity experienced even in the schools is so off right now. I'm lucky. My husband and I, we have 2 cars. We take our kids adventuring all the time, but not for my kids, but for other kids. I see some schools taking amazing field trips, and others have somebody come and speak at the school. And that's really the school that needs to get these kids out and educated and experiencing life. I could transport, it would be difficult, I could transport my 7th grader to school. But what about the parents that don't have a vehicle? What about the parents who have disabilities? What about people who are caring for elder parents? This would be, even though the law says K through 12 should be bused, and I said this at school committee, you want to talk about a travesty and inequity, penalizing people for being poor. You may or may not know, and I mentioned this at school committee, if someone misses, I think it's 10 or more unexcused absences, the school can call DCF. DCF can then become involved in a family, and this happens every day in Worcester where I work. That DCF worker can pull that child from that home for no other reason than for unexcused absences and put them in foster care with a family that may or may not speak their languages for no other reason than not accessing education. So I can take my kids to school. I'm not here for me. I'm here for everybody else that's working 3 jobs or single parents that will not be able to have their children access education if the city doesn't find a way to transport these children. And I'll leave you with this. I understand the difficulty and the complexity of the equation. I just went to Suffolk, finished last year, and you could talk 2 weeks about that equation. People are trying to make it better, and yes, we're not in a good position. Part of why we're not in a good position is the double-edged sword of having so much free cash and a great bond rating is that the governor, looking at our community, says, I'm not giving you more money because you have the money. You're choosing at the city level not to fund your schools appropriately. That's on you guys. I haven't heard that discussed, and I think that that's a very important point to bring up. Not to pull funding out of free cash, but as a city, and I am a taxpayer, and I've got 2 children on IEPs, as I've mentioned many times, who both also access LEAP programming. The city can choose to fund the schools appropriately, or we can spend the next 5 years wondering why we don't have enough funding for our schools when we all know there's an amazing team of people who can't scrape any more from the bottom of the barrel. And again, I'm not here speaking for my family. I'm speaking for those families who don't have a vehicle to get here tonight and don't, can't advocate for themselves or their children. And I think it would be a travesty if we did that to these families, especially with everything going on at the federal level. I think these are the times we need to dig deep and do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other member of the public like to make a comment? I'll ask one more time. Any other member of the public like to make a comment?
Holly Koski, used to live in Leominster, live in Ringe now. I just wanted to say, these guys have done such a great job, and the school is in such great shape this year compared to last year. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional comment from the public? I'll ask one more time. Any additional comment for the public? Third and final time. Any councilors have a final question?
Mr. Chairman, there was a statement made regarding local aid. I'd like the comptroller to respond to that out of courtesy to the speaker. Could you?
Sure, yeah. I just want to, let you know and let the person know. In no case have I ever seen the city of Leominster lose funding because of our financial practices, our prudent financial practices. It's the formula is the same across the board, and I think the schools lately have been impacted by the reduction of students. I think that's the main item that's driving our state aid being at the minimum right now. So there is no truth to the matter that we are making decisions, prudent financial decisions, that impact our state aid Chapter 70.
So another question back to the superintendent. It's $129 million of a budget in here, and I'm not the mayor, but as I read through it a couple of times, there are areas where I might make some adjustments. Having such a bias with education, where I'd go with you guys. However, Monday night, if the council decides to vote down the municipal budget, I'd like to know what your response is, your finance chair and yourself, of the impact on the schools. I think it's a fair question. You need to let the public know. You go on a 1/12 budget. There's no such thing on that? So what happens?
The mayor has to submit a budget.
Mayor submits it, okay.
Whatever it is, not all expenses at 1/12.
Okay.
Councilor Frida.
Yeah, I know most people know it, but just to make sure everybody does, we cannot increase the budget. We have no authority to increase it. So, we can cut it, which I don't think we've ever done. Of course, we're at net school spending, so you can't cut it. But it's important to make sure everybody knows we can't increase the budget.
I was going to add that, and thank you for making that clear and public. I would assume, obviously, that the department would like to have the additional funds necessary to close that gap on the transportation side. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I would assume it would be the department's position for us to pass this budget on Monday night.
In-home.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make that clear as well. Any other member of the council have a question? All right, that being said, thank you very much for not only the tremendous gains in transparency and all of your hard work during the year. It's a wholly different story than it was a year ago, and we're all glad to see that. Not perfect yet, still a work in progress, but big gains. Thank you very much, and that concludes the hearing for this evening.
I'll leave you
Nice
some
job,
little
you guys.
light reading.
Thank you.
We'll leave that with you want to leave it here?
That's for you.
Well, give it to the city clerk if anyone would like to review it in the office. Nice job, finance.
Thank you. Mike? Meeting to order. And seeing we have a quorum of the committee, well, I guess we don't have a quorum
We
of the
don't.
city council, right?
Nope.
All right, fair enough. So we'll start with C-67, relative to the appropriation of $40,000 to the library department expense account, same to be transferred from the library department salary and wages account. They've been down a assistant director and other personnel, as well as the people that are there are earning at a lower rate, so there's a surplus in the salary and wages account. So they're looking to spend that on updating the library's website in an effort to have greater outreach. And I believe the comptroller is going to allow them to encumber this for use in the upcoming fiscal year. So it'd be my position that we grant this, and I'll check with my committee members to see if they have any questions on this.
I have no questions, and I'm in agreement.
David, yourself?
I also agree.
Okay.
I have a question on that, if I may.
Yes, you may.
She doesn't get locked in, the department head doesn't get locked in to having to take the whole 40,000 and put it into a website, correct?
Well, it's not.
She has
it's actually-
flexibility?
Actually, just not. It's not just the website.
Okay, all right, that's
For
good enough then.
Interior
That's fine.
signage and whatever.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's fine,
It-
okay.
It is for that. It's for the expenses.
Yeah.
So
I just want to make sure she's not locked in.
No, I think once it goes into that account, she can spend it on
That's great.
any expense she wants, right? I mean,
I don't know. What do you say, John? I think
No,
she has
it's
to.
a special purpose appropriation, so for whatever those special purposes are,
Yeah.
she'll be able to carry it over.
Right, but for that purpose.
It could be 10 different things.
right,
Right.
and they could change it any time.
The reason why I brought it up is she's
They're
new.
not supposed to change.
Yeah,
She's new at this position.
yeah.
I don't want her to be in a situation where she spends 5,000 and anticipating to take the other 35,000 if she can't, you know? Just a
No,
little guidance on
well,
that.
first of all, the mayor,
We're pretty flexible with that stuff.
the mayor wants to make sure that it's coordinated with the city's marketing efforts. Obviously, there's procurement requirements,
Right.
so it's going to be a
Give me
process.
letter at the end of the year to tell me why she's holding.
Right, okay.
Okay.
She may not know the vendors right now or anything.
Right.
but She knows
Right.
the purposes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. C-68, relative to the appropriation of $50,000 to the police department overtime account, same to be transferred from police department salary and wages account. This has sort of been the same old story. You know, they're 98% expended as the time of the letter, June 7th, in the overtime account, and they have surpluses in the salary and wages account because of the circumstances that the chief related when he was down here on Tuesday night. It'd be my position to grant C-68.
I'm in agreement.
I agree, it's just an interdepartmental transfer, so I'm fine with it.
Okay, I'll move to C-69, relative to the appropriation of $8,000 to the police department capital outlay expense account, same to be transferred from excess and deficiency account. This is for the asbestos site survey for the police safety building, which I guess would be preparatory to the demolition contract or contracts that'll be necessary once the properties are acquired. And it would be my position to move along the police project, that we certainly would, I think, want to support this.
I'm in agreement.
All set?
I agree.
Okay. All right, C-70, relative to the appropriation of $90,000 to the Recreation Department capital outlay expense account, same to be transferred from the excess and deficiency account. I did ask for some backup on this today. I don't know if the comptroller has anything for us.
Which one is that?
The recreation one, C-70?
Oh,
That was, did you
the
get this?
$90,000?
Yes.
The Fournier Park,
California Park.
Fournier Park thing?
I didn't see,
Got it if you don't have it.
is that it?
That's it right there.
Okay. All
Which
right.
I think she might be, that's what the original thing was, but she
Yeah.
hit me a few days ago with, they may be applying for a grant, it might be a matching part of a grant to improve the field there. Because in order to have tournaments there on the weekends, they gotta go from 290 to 300 feet and stuff, so.
So this could change.
No, it's gonna be lights, but it could
Right.
be like the matching part. We could get one of those $250,000 or $500,000 grants. I think she's gonna apply for that.
But, so this money's gonna get spent on,
It's gonna
on the
be-
same purpose regardless?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
So,
But they might be able to leverage it. to
leverage
get
some more money?
from the state.
Yeah. All right, that's good to know. Any questions or concerns?
So, Mr. Richard, you would suggest that we approve?
Yeah, the main, there's especially some poles there that are a danger and have been for a while.
Okay.
And it needs it hasn't been done in a long time. And it's like getting a whole new field, right?
Yeah.
You know, if it's properly lighted, it gets quite a lot of use.
Okay.
I think we've held off for long enough.
Okay, sounds good to me. Everybody okay?
Yes.
I'm okay with it.
All right, C-71, relative to the appropriation of $2,500 to the Emergency Management Agency expense account. And that's also to be transferred from excess and deficiency. There's a letter from the mayor, from Charlie Coggins to the mayor dated May 29. Apparently they're having some issues with a fence that separates the property from an abutter, and there's some concerns, and they're going to replace the fence, and they've got a quote for $2,100, and then an additional $400 to remove the old rotted fence. So I'd be okay with this.
I'd be okay with it as well.
I'm all set as well.
All right, so that would be a unanimous recommendation as well. C-72, relative to the appropriation of $21,300 to the Emergency Management Agency salary and wages account. Same to be transferred from the collective bargaining expense account. And this is related to sick leave and vacation buyback for the retiring emergency management director. Although I don't have the breakdown, I suppose we could obtain one by Monday night, maybe.
It's 20% of his pay.
Okay.
He's eligible for the full amount. So
Okay.
If he's making $80,000, and $20,000 of it is for sick leave buyback.
Yeah.
And then $3,000 is for vacation.
Vacation time.
Over and above the
All right.
2 weeks that he normally can.
All right. Everybody okay with that one?
I'm okay with the expenditure. I'm just questioning where it's coming from. Why is it coming out of the collective bargaining expense account?
Because you get some left money.
Once we spent the $90,000 for a rec, we didn't have any more free cash.
Oh,
So there's available
Okay.
funds in collective bargaining that.
That's like an advanced free cash payment, right?
It's actually a cookie jar
Well,
up
it's
in the
just-
comptroller's
luckily,
office.
we didn't have as much vacation buyback as we anticipated. A couple line items there, yeah.
okay. All right, that's fine.
C7, no, that
gotta
was,
see
we
that
already did
more.
that.
Yeah.
C73, relative to the appropriation of $25,609 to the city clerk's salary and wages account from excess and deficiency. Once again, vacation and sick leave buyback, and there's a letter that supports that. And I'm okay with that, if you folks are.
I'm all
Okay.
set.
Okay, C74, relative to the appropriation of $10,000 to the Medicare expense account, same to be transferred from the collective bargaining expense account. John, what does the Medicare account do? Is that pay?
On April, anybody who's hired after April 1st, 1986,
Yep,
we have to pay 1.45% of their salary for Medicare tax. And so the original budget is just a guesstimate. And so salaries during the year of those people came in higher, and the treasurer is estimating that he needs another $10,000 to get 3 years to pay the federal government.
so there was a time when you didn't pay that, huh?
There's still a few of us
People left?
left that were hired before 86.
So you're saving us money every day.
That's right, 1.45%.
All right, so I'm good with that.
I'm fine.
I don't think we have
I'm
a
all
choice.
set
Yeah.
as well.
And then that leaves C75, C76, and
77 and
C77 and C78, right? So, C75 I guess we should do. C-75, relative to the appropriation of $265,000 to the fiscal year 19 school department expense account, and that's being raised from fiscal 19 revenue. Something we discussed a little bit earlier with the budget. Are you people okay with that?
I'm all set with it.
Okay. And that leaves just the budget items, C-76, C-77, and C-78, all subject to a public hearing on Monday evening, so it would be premature for us to make any recommendation before the hearing, so,
Just for informational purposes.
yeah,
There are gonna be some appropriations coming down on Monday night. It's the end of the year.
yes,
And some departments are a little bit short, you know, and so we're gonna need an emergency preamble.
A bunch of them, or just a bunch of?
A few of them.
Okay.
there's 5 of them, I think.
Yeah. Is it on, do you have a copy of the,
I have it on my phone. I can tell you what they
Agenda.
are.
one of them is fire overtime, and the fire overtime they need, there's a little bit of a miscommunication between the mayor's office and fire about, they were asking $125,000, and they had originally asked for $250,000, we only gave them $125, because we wanted to wait to see if there was money inside their salary and wage budget that they could just transfer rather than using free cash or something.
Yeah,
And so when they asked for $125,000 more, we thought it was the other $125,000 they didn't get.
I see.
They actually needed $125,000 more. So they ended up, I don't know what it is, $75,000 maybe?
60,000.
60,000, so they ended up, so instead of giving them 125, we end up giving them 60. But they need it for the end of the year. That's one of them.
And David can't vote against it.
I can't vote
That's
for
what I meant.
it or against it.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, right. Well, you would, yeah.
What are the other?
C-80, relative to the appropriation of $20,000 to the unemployment expense account.
Yeah, we're just, there have been a lot of discipline issues this year. You know, we don't lay anybody off. But when we have discipline issues and they're let go,
Yeah.
then we have unemployment.
They are
We
able
have-
to collect, yeah.
They're able to collect. And even, you know, there's some cases where the police officers and firefighters, they wait till they're 65. And even though they, by law, have to have to retire,
Unemployed.
then they go collect unemployment. Even though we do get an offset on the pension.
Yeah.
But, so there's a lot of reasons why the city side, this is just the city side of unemployment.
So
You know, it's not the school.
If
So
we didn't-
We need 20,000 to.
if we didn't pass that as an emergency preamble, what would happen?
Have a special meeting.
What do you mean?
In other words, it's on the agenda as an emergency preamble, last meeting before the end of the fiscal year. What happens if we didn't pass it?
And we would have a deficit in that account.
Okay.
We'd have to have, or we could have a special meeting
You
with
don't
those items on there prior to June 30th.
don't-
Which, by the way, I just want to kind of say that, you know, I don't know.
This is just
The open
those-
meeting law, you know, it's just, you're putting it on there on one night.
It's fine.
Although it's on the agenda, right? They are on the
Yeah.
agenda.
It's on the
Yeah,
agenda.
they're
It's on the
listed.
Yeah,
agenda.
it is
So
on
we're
the
not-
agenda.
We don't have a
It's not,
quorum
Any
here,
other
so-
matters before the
We'll
finance
see if
covers
anything
it.
happens between now and Monday,
Yeah.
you know, as departments realize.
Right, right, right.
And there's 13,000 for the library steps.
Well, yeah, but that's just
You can,
That's,
yeah,
co-
but that's another transfer, right?
right, it's a transfer and it's
But,
with an emer-
yeah, yeah.
that's an emergency preamble
Because the
too.
appropriation will lapse as of June 30th,
Right.
right? You know, so
if you need a
And-
special meeting, Thursday night will
we
work
don't-
better.
yeah,
We're good?
We don't need it.
Okay.
And then C-83, the last one with an emergency preamble is $30,000 to the refuse collection and disposal account.
Yeah, he just got his May bill, and so now he's doing the math for what he thinks June will be,
Yeah,
and so he thinks he's gonna be 30,000 short.
and that's coming out of two sources,
Yeah,
building department salary and wages, which must be a surplus, and
yeah,
10,000 from interest on bonds expense
Yeah.
account.
yeah. Just trying to make it through the year.
Okay. Any questions?
No,
Yes.
no, not yet.
Those are all the emergency preambles.
Yeah.
Anything else? Yes?
Mark, may I ask him a question?
Sure.
The rubbish barrels, again, beat up big time, a lot of them. Has Dean talked about anything about working?
Those are expensive. We
I
do,
know.
they replace them.
They do replace them?
Yeah, but
I didn't know if there was anything,
You guys should think
As
about
long as they're
charging
beat up.
$75
something for,
for.
well, they get stolen.
Yeah, if they get stolen,
get
you gotta pay
stolen.
for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, if I
Just
come to your house to take
replacement.
yours, you shouldn't have to go pay $75 for them.
Right. But
But it's $75.
That's what they're doing.
We should have an
Both
insurance
my
program for those
daughters
too.
pay, what, $500 a year? It isn't part of their taxes, and they pay a lot more taxes than we do.
Who's that?
Motion to adjourn
I
the,
thought it was a trooper. and
Oh,
it
yeah.
was in,
And
Second,
I will
all in
second
favor?
it.
Yeah.
all right?
Yay.
We're adjourned.
Much out either.
8:22.
Nice work, Joe.
Okay, buddy, good job, thanks.
The Leominster City Council meeting is brought to you by the generous support of the Service Oil Company, 345R Lancaster Street, Leominster, 978-466-1922.